I'd like to call the meeting to order. Today is the regular board meeting for the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. Today is September 11th, 2024. It marks 23 years after the horrific terror attack on our country. When we stand for the pledge this evening, we will observe 11 seconds of silence before we begin. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mrs. Ettinger, would you please take the roll call?
Mark Borowski.
Here.
Eric Brooks.
Here.
Thomas Harland.
Here.
Betty Koenig.
Here.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Here.
Diane Voigt.
Here.
David Wad.
Here.
Anthony Zenobia.
Here.
Kelly Piasek.
Here. Before we begin tonight, I also just want to welcome Thomas Harland to the board, and we're happy to have you. Is there anything you'd like to say?
I'm honored to be here, and I'm very excited to serve the Waukesha community.
Thank you so much. We'll all be helping you with microphone things, so glad to have you, and it's nice to have the table full again. All right, Mrs. Ettinger, can you also please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. We're going to begin with bright lights tonight. We have Amanda Wagner and Dan Schreier to talk to us tonight about AVID. Welcome.
Oh, wait. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Siebert. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Amanda Wagner, and I serve as our AVID District Coordinator. And alongside me is Dan Schreier. Dan is the Athletic and Activities Principal, as well as an Associate Principal at Waukesha South High School, and a former math and AVID elective teacher. Tonight we're here to talk to you a little bit about some celebrations with our AVID system here in Waukesha. AVID's mission is to close the opportunity gap to prepare all students for college and career readiness in a global society. How we do this is ensuring that our students have a rigorous academic experience, they gain opportunity knowledge, and have student agency. As educators, what we need to do is we insist on rigor, we break down barriers, and we align the work so that we can advocate for our students. So that's just a brief overview of our system here in Waukesha. When we talk AVID, we have AVID school-wide and we have the AVID elective. When we talk AVID school-wide AVID is for every single student here in Waukesha who is part of an AVID school. AVID School-wide provides our students with a career and culture of career and college readiness. It increases student engagement and involvement, and it provides our teachers with research-based best practices and a common language. Some of you with students in the district may have heard of the acronym WICOR: Writing, Inquiry, Collaboration, Organization, and Reading. We also have the AVID elective. The AVID elective is designed for students in grades 7 through 12th grade. Students who are in the AVID elective, it's an optional class that they can take. How we go about identifying students for that AVID elective is we look for students who are academically typically in the middle, So you're middle of the road based on test scores. We then reach out to teachers for teacher recommendations, and students are also able to apply for AVID themselves because AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. Now, AVID is not something that's a remedial course. AVID is meant to be acceleration. We are taking students who, again, are in the middle academically, and we are pushing them to take honors and AP classes. We provide them support through something called Socratic tutorials. So tonight we want to celebrate a little bit of our AVID senior data from the elective students from last year, and also Mr. Schreier, who was a speaker this summer at a national conference. Our AVID elective seniors, so our students who were part of the AVID elective at least 2 years, many of them since 7th or 8th grade. Last year we had 116 AVID Scholar graduates. If you look up at this data, 116 graduates had over $5.5 million in college scholarships. 74 of those students chose to go to a 4-year college, 3 went to a 2-year, 13 are attending WCTC, 2 to the military, and 3 directly into the workforce with internships. I also want to highlight AP classes. We had over 386 AP classes taken by 116 students. That's incredible. As well as 92 Project Lead the Way classes, and 37 of those 116 students are first-generation college-going students, so changing the trajectory of their families' lives. Now, this doesn't happen magically. It happens through a lot of hard work from our educators here in Waukesha, and we are very lucky to have amazing educators here. We provide professional learning for our staff. This summer, we were able to train about 80 people here in Waukesha a day in August. We offered 3 different paths that some of our instructional coaches led and facilitated. We had kindergarten through 12th grade teachers learning about different AVID strategies and instructional routines that can increase student engagement. Through some grants, we were also able to send a group of about 22 educators to a national conference in Minnesota. Dan Schreier was selected to speak at this national conference, and we'll talk about that in a minute because it's a huge honor. But I think something that's really important to highlight is we survey our staff members after they're part of this training, and we found that 100% who took the survey would recommend AVID training to a colleague. And that says a lot about the engagement of the trainings and the ability to take back the strategies right directly into their classroom to engage the learners. So let's talk a little bit about Dan. Dan has been in our district. This is his 17th year. He has been at Waukesha South. He started out as a math teacher and then began teaching the AVID elective. A few years ago, Dan moved into the role of athletics, activities, and associate principal at Waukesha South, where he continues to lead through an AVID lens. Dan, in I feel like December, he sent me an email and said, you know, Amanda, I think this might be the year where I'm going to submit a speech to the AVID Summer Institute conference. I was like, okay, yeah, do it. He took some time to reflect, and after many revisions of his speech, he submitted it, and he was chosen. Many educators across our country submitted speeches, so Dan should feel, and we should be very proud of him for being selected to share his AVID journey. We have a quick video that AVID put together highlighting Dan and his work. I'll cue that up. If you just hit the arrow in the corner, it should work. Fingers crossed.
I started teaching when I was 21, 22 years old. I've wanted to teach for a long period of my life. It's really like the dream profession. My dad was a professor at Marquette University. He has a very engaging style, and I remember the power of that storytelling in the classroom and the lesson I just thought was really cool. I wanted to provide students that opportunity to connect with them, to support them, especially early on. I remember being really nervous to do things incorrectly, and getting things wrong was embarrassing, so I found a little bit of a perfectionist in me. I remember getting a reflection from a student who was just really honest, like appreciated the class, but gave me feedback that I needed to connect with students more. And it kind of stuck with me. In my first year at Waukesha South, Avid was implementing the Avid elective for the first time. I didn't know all the pieces that would make me the teacher that I wanted to be, but Avid seemed to have a number of those pieces to support me becoming the educator that I hoped to one day be. Once I moved into the Avid role, started learning how important it was to make those connections and build relationships and really truly look out for students and celebrate their assets, I started to see how that could benefit the classroom. I just totally rethought what education is and what it can be, and I feel like I've learned to be more empathic. The thing that excites me the most about the Avid approach is the celebration of each individual human being for everything they bring into school every day. Avid certainly helped me better understand the value of celebrating students for who they are, and honestly, like who they aren't at times. Through my involvement with Avid, I think I've learned a lot about myself. We're all incomplete human beings, and we all have a lot to learn, and we have a lot to teach each other. The quiet 14-year-old in class who doesn't say much has a ton to teach me about being a human being.
Not only did Dan share his speech, which when we have access to his full speech, we'll make sure that you can see that in front of 2,000 educators from across the country, but he also kicked off our high school launch this year and shared his message with all of our high school staff. Because no matter what, if you're an Avid elective teacher, a math teacher, Phi Ed, business, whatever you teach, we are all teachers who believe that our kids can and have opportunities, and we are Avid educators. So I want to turn the floor over to Dan, where he can share a little bit about his experience.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for welcoming us to the school board meeting. First off, Amanda and I taught the Avid elective together, and she's the GOAT. She's awesome, just an incredible teacher. She did a phenomenal job with our Avid elective students and English students when she was at South, and just does an awesome job supporting students and teachers in the district. I honestly didn't really prepare anything. It was a great experience. One thing that Amanda shared was the training piece. We were fortunate enough to send a group to Avid National Conference this year for the first time ever in San Diego, and I always feel a immense amount of urgency to bring something back from conferences if we have the fortune of going, and the speech was really written as a reflection after the conference as to like how can I support both educators and students with all the learning that I was fortunate enough to get at the conferences, whether it's an athletic director conference or Avid conference. I feel a tremendous urgency to bring something back, and hopefully it helped. It was a really awesome experience. So,
Any questions or comments for Mr. Schreier? Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thank you, and congratulations. It is a huge honor for all that you're doing, to be recognized and to be able to participate in all of that. I think that's just really remarkable. One of the questions that I have for you is because the parents that I know that have had children in Avid love it, right? It was the saving grace for many of them to bring them through where they were, whether it was with notes, whether it was with study habits or in learning to do that. And so my question really for you is the model that is Avid, where I expect our students to have individual achievement, right? I expect the rigor, I expect high expectations. This is a model that I would think we would be rolling out and having across the district wide. And so the challenge for me is, sorry, how do we take that for those non-Avid students, because we have the same expectations, and so with what you're learning and how you relate that into, you mentioned about, the human, how do we take that back to all of the students in our district?
yeah, I think there are a couple pieces. One, when we were teaching together, we had one elective at the high school, just at South High School. It was before the elective had gotten into North and West. I think the expansion of it has been phenomenal, the support from the district to expand to have more, not only Avid students, Avid elective students, but also Avid elective teachers that can support, if there is a training, we are hopeful that our teachers will come back with Avid strategies that they can support every teacher with. So if if you're going into a tech ed class or a business class or a math class, you are getting those Avid strategies and Avid relational capacity strategies that help build those structures that support all students. It might not have the exact same feel as the Avid elective, but I think there are pieces that can be brought to all of our classes. When I was talking with Alyssa Barrett about the speech, she said, when you were teaching calculus, you weren't a calculus teacher, you were an Avid teacher. And I think that was really important to see any class that you teach with the strategies and structures that Avid helps provide.
From the Avid elective, are all students who want to be part of it, are they able to get in it, or is there waiting lists?
So we do have waiting lists. We try to open sections based off of student demand, but every single year we have been increasing the opportunity for students to take it. We also are working really hard within our homeroom to embed a lot of those Avid strategies into the different levels of homeroom.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mrs. Voigt?
I had the pleasure of hearing his presentation at the kickoff at North a couple weeks ago, and it was really, really very, very good. I complimented as I came in, and I just wanted to share with everyone else that if you have a chance to hear it when it's recorded and shared back from that conference, be sure to do that.
I have a comment and a question, because I guess my first interaction with you, Mr. Schreier, was seeing you as a calculus teacher who was navigating AP Calc across the district when we had, limited capacity to serve everybody. And I just saw you go above and beyond and the flexibility that you offered and how the students responded to that, right? It wasn't an ideal situation, but they were successful because of what you brought to it. And I think it's that mindset of this is possible, we can work through this. And then I've seen that with you as a coach before you became an AD. And you probably don't even know how many athletes were on opposing teams that you said positive things to and support them. And so I've seen that Avid mindset from you as a leader. I think that's the best part, I think, about our staff having this training and having this expertise. And now as an AD, I'm just curious, how you have brought, to share for the board, how you've brought your experiences and your Avid knowledge into that role where you're a leader of leaders and coaches and students in that extracurricular context.
Well, I appreciate the incredibly kind comments. One thing that I'm helping a homeroom this year, and the quote that we use today is, this isn't a have to, this is a get to, and I try to support our coaches and teachers in the mindset that we get to do this every day. Like, how awesome of an opportunity. That's really what this speech was about. The speech was about how hard teaching is, how challenging coaching is. But if we think about how difficult it is, we miss the incredibly awesome moments that we're provided every day and might miss the opportunity to celebrate those with kids. I do think it's how we live and how we go about our day to day. So every time I have the opportunity to present, whether it's with an Avid training or in front of coaches at PD, I have an agenda. I use Wicker strategies. I have students or staff collaborate and read or provide speaking opportunities. So it's a process that we're thinking about all the time. Even if I'm meeting with student athletes, I try to use Wicker strategies because I know they're really important and they really help celebrate students and help build them, build the skills that will help them be successful, not just in high school, but well beyond.
Thank you. It was an honor to have you represent us, and thank you both for being here and talking about this great program.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I do have one other piece. I did leave 2 flyers. Just want to thank the board for all their support in helping to celebrate South High School for everything that we are and have and all the cool events that we do. One of the events that we're running next Friday, it's September 20th, is called Southfest. It's an annual festival of South High School. It starts at 4 o'clock with honestly, games, food, inflatables. It's a youth event, but it's also run by our high school kids. We have a soccer game at 4:30, a varsity soccer game at 4:30, and then a varsity football game at 7. At halftime of the football game, we have our band, our cheer, our dance. They perform every game. It's really just a celebration of our community. Our SALT student athletes are also making food that'll be up in the press box. We welcome all of you to come see the new stadium. It's beautiful. The bleachers are awesome. The new outbuildings are great. And to really celebrate all the hard work that our community has done to, again, celebrate South High School. And then a week from Saturday, I'm sorry, 2 weeks from Saturday, Saturday the 28th, is our Marching Band Festival. It's the second largest marching band festival in the state outside of the state meet at Whitewater. It's the largest night marching band festival. It is an incredible event. There are about 15 bands that play, and we're excited to announce that the Dancing Grannies are coming to do a performance with our dance team right before the judges present. So we welcome you to either of those events. Again, we really appreciate all the support at South High School, and you're always welcome to come say hi. So thank you.
Thank you. So exciting.
Can I just say, Dan, I just want to say something too. Last year, being a new board member, I was really excited to get all the invitations that I did throughout the year of South events. I feel like I spent the most time at South last year because I was just being invited to things. And, you know, as a board member, I really appreciate this kind of stuff because then I know what's going on. I feel like I'm welcomed. I, come on in, and like I said, I probably spent the most time in all the schools last year at South, and I loved every minute of it. So thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We do not have student reports tonight. It's still very early in the school year, so we will have them begin joining us in October. That means we're now at the section of our meeting where there's an opportunity for citizens to speak. We have 2 speakers tonight. Because there are 6 speakers or less, speakers will be notified at 3 minutes, but allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and to be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We would like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Our first speaker this evening will be Kurt Burry.
Good evening, school board. My name is Kurt Burry. I'm the parent of 2 students that attend Waukesha right now, and I'm actually glad you're here because part of my topic is AVID. So I want to talk about communication in the school district and throughout the community. Over the weekend, I received a newsletter that I was very impressed with, and I want to talk a little bit about that as far as why I was impressed with it. It was just a positive atmosphere that was conveyed throughout the school district and that was described in the newsletter. And I'll give you a couple examples. AVID had a page that was dedicated for it, and my daughter has been an AVID in all 4 years at Waukesha North, and every year we sign her up for AVID as a family decision. We're very impressed with the program, and I thought the write-up of AVID was really interesting. I was amazed that 116 students had graduated from AVID last year, and I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I liked getting that newsletter. I liked the paper form, having to leaf through it and just read about all the good things in the school district. I mean, I'll give you another example, the bilingual program that we have here at Waukesha. I was reading through that. I like the QR code where families can access more information directly if they're interested. And over the weekend, I was visiting some relatives, And I didn't bring up the newsletter at all, but they actually asked me if I got the newsletter. And I said, yeah, I got the newsletter, and I was already impressed with it, so I was interested to see what they were going to say about it. And they had two real little kids, two little toddlers, and they were interested in the bilingual program for when their kids are eventually old enough to go to Waukesha. And they were looking through the newsletter and like, well, have you heard anything about the bilingual program? And I've heard a little bit about it, but they were really impressed with the write-up. And I know that information is in the website and it's communicated in other venues as well. But I think just getting that newsletter, not only the parents, but also community members, because they're not in the district right now, has a lot of value because just getting that as another forum. And I mean, the positive attitude of that newsletter is something that I took away as well. Very colorful. I like seeing the student achievements. I like getting information about the high school musicals that are going on and the plays. Like what South has Midsummer Night Dream coming up in November. West has Harry Potter. North has the Puffs. I didn't know what the Puffs was. I had to ask my daughters, but once I found out, I thought it was pretty cool. So I just want to convey that I like the newsletter. I like the communication that's going out there. If I had a suggestion, I would say I'd like to learn more about the curriculum. I know the standards that we have is high rigor, high standards. We want our students to achieve at a high level, and there's a lot of work being done at the curriculum level to implement standardized curriculum for English and math and science. There's a lot of pilot programs going on, and as a parent that's interested in that, I want to keep up to date on how those pilot programs are progressing, all the good things that the administration and school board are doing.
2 minutes.
And it is hard to keep track of all that. It might be in the website. I've tried to look for it and just tried to follow the school board meetings. It's kind of hard. If there was a location for that could give that information out for parents, 'cause I think it's valuable to understand all the good things that we're doing and the improvements that we're doing to raise our test scores, to raise our standards as far as curriculum. A little bit about standards and assessments. I watched the recent Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, and I think the work that the administration is doing with defining the assessments that we're trying to use as measures is yeoman's work with the constraints that the state is giving us, with the changes of the metrics that they're imposing on all the districts across the state. I went to the website with the assessments, and I like how it's laid out. I know we're talking about updating our KPIs when it comes to teaching and learning. It's unfortunate that the state is always moving the goalpost as far as what we want to classify as above average or average as far as achievement. It makes it hard to measure, but I think the administration is looking at measures that are accurate and that we can use to gauge our improvement, because that's what it's all about. It's about continuously improving and not being satisfied with the status quo. And I
30
think
seconds.
the administration and the school board, the teachers, and even the students, everybody has that mindset. And I just want to say thank you. And Mr. Harlan, welcome to the school board. I look forward to seeing how you contribute to the school board. So, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Mr. Reese.
Good evening. I too want to talk about the state testing standards. I watched Teaching and Learning Committee, and the fact that Jill Underly has absolutely taken it upon herself to decimate the standards in this state is mind-blowing. This board has been doing the yeoman's work, trying to track and improve standards, but she just wiped out all the way to measure them. She completely changed everything. I've been coming since my daughter started kindergarten. We were talking about proficiency standards, proficiency. They got to meet proficiency or exceeding for proficiency. We got to meet. They even took away the word proficiency. They got rid of that. They make it so confusing. The way to make something unusable is to make it so confusing and so frustrating that parents don't want to be involved. And it seems like that's her drive. She wants this education as low as every state around us. She's just absolutely has taken upon herself to decimate this in a race to the bottom. The ACT testing, years ago when they got rid of it and they made it so everybody had to take it, that destroyed a lot of information that we gathered. I wish this board would take it upon it to make it optional again, to say it's optional that you take the ICT test and that you don't, it's not mandated. And now you're going to tell me it's law, Paul. It's law that we have to do this. Really, well, it's law that MPS has to hire officers for their school, and they can ignore it. So if school boards, some school boards around us going to pick and choose what laws they decide to ignore and what laws they decide to implement, why can't we? What are they going to do? They're not doing anything to MPS for what they're doing. And at least we'd have a metrics to examine where our kids were years ago, again, at least the ones that are going to college, how many want to go to college, and how prepared they are for it. You know, I mean, if we can pick and choose what we want to do around here in this state, then pick that, you know? But back to the forward testing, the fact that what they did to this is just, it's mind-blowing that this board puts in so much work, and that some people have done the woman's work to try to straighten things out, and for her to do this and get away with it, and for our governor to act like it's no big deal that he's the education governor, except for when it comes to this, he has no clue what he's doing. So anyways, that's what I wanted to share tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, moving into our first action item, we have minutes for your consideration. We have 3 sets of minutes tonight: the August 14th regular board meeting, the August 14th executive session, and the September 5th special board meeting. Mrs. Voigt.
I move to approve the 3 sets of minutes as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Koenig. Any questions? All right. Mrs. Ettinger, would you take the roll call, please?
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Thomas Harland.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. All right, we'll start with our WEF report. Mrs. Koenig.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. The Waukesha Education Foundation Board of Directors met on September 4th, 2024. We welcomed a new annual sponsor in August. Mathnasium joined our family of silver annual sponsors, and we are excited about our partnership with them. The annual Evening for Education date has been set for Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. We will be rolling out sponsorship opportunities soon, and we hope that you will all plan to join us. Annually, the Waukesha Education Foundation Incorporated recognizes individuals and groups and businesses who have made a significant contribution to education in the school district of Waukesha. The 2024 WEF Award nomination window is now open and will close on 12/31/24. You can visit the website at www.waukeshaeducationfoundation.org and click on the awards link. There are 3 categories of recognition, each honoring a different sector of our community that makes a difference. There's the Corporate Partner Award, there's the Community Partner Award, and the Sally Jo Michalko Lifetime Excellence in Education Award. Please feel free to nominate an organization or an individual. Winners will be honored at the Evening of Education in March. We are continuing to seek new sponsors and board members. We are in great need of a new treasurer, as our current treasurer has been on the board for 7 years. We also have some veteran board members who will be rotating off at the end of the year, so we would appreciate any connections to help us identify some new leaders to bring into our organization. We have also set all of our 2024-2025 dates for special events. Please mark your calendars. The Evening for Education is 3/18/25. Partners in Education reception will be June 17th, 2025, and the golf outing will be August 7th, 2025. Madam President, that concludes my WEF report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Koenig. Mr. Wad?
Yeah, just a quick question. When do the terms for the WEF board members run? You said they were coming up on the end of their terms. I'm just wondering, is that
I believe
calendar or is it school year?
it's June. Is it school year?
Okay.
It's
Calendar year? Calendar
Calendar
year,
year?
got it.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you.
yeah. Sorry, I'm new to the board. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Thank you, Mrs. Koenig. All right, so we added discussion with possible action to general business tonight, rather than taking the KPIs individually with each of the committee reports. So since every committee at this point has advanced a recommendation for KPIs, we're taking them all together. Dr. Siebert, did you want to introduce what we have on the table, and then we can open it
Sure.
up for discussion?
Oh, sure. So at your places, Ms. Genderman made a nice handout that shows the recommended 6 KPIs for the district. You'll recall that we first started our foray into KPIs in October of 2021. We had several, and we've had discussions over the years that perhaps some of those are more metrics as opposed to key performance indicators. And so over the past few months, each of the committees has been working together to figure out what are the major drivers, if you will, that will drive continuous improvement within their committee or that department to move the district forward in the spirit of continuous improvement. So with that being said, each of the ones on this document have been approved in the committees. And so we'll go around just very briefly. We'll start with Ms. Genderman and allow her to kind of talk about the teaching and learning ones and a little bit high level of the process on how they got there. We'll then move on to Mr. Pat. We'll then move on to Mr. Clark, and we'll finish with Mrs. Thede, whose HR committee just approved that moments ago. So, Ms. Genderman, why don't you start, if that's okay with you, Dr. Pass?
That'd be great, thank you, yeah.
Good evening. Like you stated, during the previous teaching and learning community meetings, the KPIs were discussed, and a few were recommended to continue with revisions. The KPIs were written with a mindset of continuous improvement despite any assessment changes. The indicators focus on student performance in the area of English language arts and/or reading, along with mathematics. The following are the KPI statements that were most recently approved by the Teaching and Learning Committee. Increase the percentage of third grade students in the meeting or advanced performance level on the state assessment in English language arts. Increase the percentage of 8th grade students in the meeting or advanced performance level on the state assessment in math. And finally, increase the percentage of 11th grade students that meet the college and career readiness benchmark on the ACT assessment in reading and math. The Teaching and Learning Department will continue to focus on implementing the board-approved curriculum resources with strong instructional practices to meet the needs of all of our learners.
Good evening. During our September 3rd Student Services Board Committee, the members approved the recommended KPI focused on student engagement. It reads that Waukesha students will continue to increase their annual attendance percentage rate. The metric of attendance directly correlates to engagement in that if students are engaged, they will come to school. Attendance data is a metric that is easily disaggregated, which has and will continue to help us pinpoint areas where barriers exist for students to be engaged. The school district of Waukesha's overall annual attendance rate percentage has increased each of the past 3 school years, and our student services department strives to continue that trend with all of the work we are doing to implement a consistent multi-level system of support for our students to meet their individual needs and increase academic and social success for increasing student engagement.
And F&F approved on Monday night, we had 4 previous KPIs, but we've shrunk it down to 1, and it really comes down to the fiscal audit that's completed every summer. And the KPI reads, ensure the successful completion of the annual third-party financial audit with no material misstatements and a clean audit report. The benefits, as I see it, and I taking it from our conversation as well at F&F, the nice thing is this is a third-party evaluation. The review of the audit is reported out every year, as is protocol and has been protocol. So we will be revisiting this, obviously, every January or so. And then the audit is also all-encompassing of all the financial activity of the school district during the fiscal year. There were some other areas in our old KPIs. 2 of them were baked into board policy because we felt that why have a KPI if we already have a policy that's guiding that conversation. And the later 2 were both tied to what I consider to be budget assumptions, which we agree on in December of every calendar year. So I'll hand it off to Sharon.
Okay, thank you.
And then earlier this evening, the Human Resources Committee also went from 4 KPIs down to 1. Teacher retention rate will be 92% or higher. The other 3 KPIs that we had in the committee are definitely supporting metrics. We'll still monitor them, but ultimately, we chose to keep the 1 retention rate at 92% or higher.
Yeah, please.
So just to follow up on what Mrs. Thiede just said, so the recommended KPIs are the 6 on your sheet. That doesn't mean we won't still have a number of metrics, and each of the committees discussed the various metrics that we'll continue to use to monitor overall organizational health as well as continuous improvement efforts that feed up to those KPIs in most senses.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up for discussion. So we have this document to consider as an aggregate recommendation from all of the committees that advanced KPIs. I just want to begin by complimenting the board and the respective committees with the committee leaders and the administrative leaders that this was hard. Right? We met in our workshop earlier this summer and we said, we've got this 4-page document of things that we want to measure and we need to bring it, boil it down to, what are the handful of things that are going to tell us that we're moving the district in the right direction. As Dr. Siebert said, it doesn't remove the necessity or the expectation that we're going to continue to be a measurement-oriented district. We're going to continue to focus on continuous improvement, but getting to these things and understanding how our metrics kind of feed these KPIs, I think this was just, not only was a difficult exercise, but as I watched the couple of cycles of meetings that we were able to pull this forward in, I was just really impressed by how this came together. So I want to thank all of you for that. And hopefully everybody felt like they had a voice in this conversation as we were contemplating all of this. So at this point, we can entertain discussion, questions. There's nothing absolutely final about any of this until we decide to take action on it. So looks like Mr. Watt is first. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I really like the approach that we took of trying to find essentially 1, maybe 2 key ideas to create our KPIs that encompass what gives us the best view of the overall health in this area, and are we improving in that one area? The metrics that all the areas to, again, clearly support and give guidance, should we not be meeting KPIs of areas to look at for potential improvement, or where there may be areas that we're slipping. But I just think, and I think for our stakeholders too, the ability to just see a small set of KPIs that will give them a great picture of the overall health of these key areas was really good. I really want to commend the administration for bringing these forward, and I, as a board member, was really excited about the discussions we had on them in our individual committee meetings.
Mrs. Voigt.
I really feel that these are the key performance indicators. Like, we're boiling down the 4 or 5 sub actions that help you to get to this final and key outcome. So I really commend the less is more in terms of really a quality statement of what we're looking for as far as continuous improvement and improved attendance and staff retention. I think these are the really key ideas about what we're working for.
Anybody else? Okay. Sounds like we might be wanting to take the next step.
I would make a motion.
Your microphone's not on.
I would make a motion to approve the key performance indicators as recommended for teaching and learning, student services, finance and facilities, and human resources.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, Mrs. Ettinger, would you take the roll call, please?
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Thomas Harlan.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. Thank you, everybody. All right, we're moving on to the consent agenda, and we will begin with Mr. Clark with a gift report.
Yeah, one gift to report on. Waukesha South High School received $3,983 from Shane and Kelly Vaughn to be used for a 2-man sled for the Waukesha South football program.
Thank you. All right, as always, your agenda includes various categories for approval. If any board member wishes to have an item set aside for separate consideration, you will have that opportunity. So there were no expulsions tonight included. I was going to say, please bear with me as I read through. We have a lengthy consent agenda tonight, so I'm going to read out for the record all of the policies that are in the consent agenda. As a reminder, our consent agenda by law dictates what comes to consent agenda versus what comes to committee. And revisions to existing policies will come to consent agenda. New policies will go to committee. Of course, any one of these could be taken up separately. So the policies for approval under the consent agenda tonight include statutory language alignment policies in Group 1. There are 18 policies. Policy 145, board member anti-harassment. 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities. 2411, school counseling and academic career planning. 2414, human growth and development. 2510, adoption of textbooks. 2521, selection of instructional materials and equipment. 5120, assignment within district. 5136, personal communication devices other than cell phones. 5136.01, technology, resources, and other electronic equipment. 5136.02, cellular phones in classrooms. 5451.03, guidelines for student scholarships. 5516, student hazing. 5517, student anti-harassment. 5517.01, bullying. 5600.01, disciplinary consequences for student misconduct. 5730, equal access for non-district sponsored student clubs and activities. And 7230, gifts, grants, and bequests. Second group of 10 policies with statutory language alignment includes 1220, employment of superintendent. 1422, non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity. 1460, physical examination. 1662, employee anti-harassment. 3122, non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity. 3160, physical examination. 3362, employee anti-harassment. 4122, non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity. 4160, physical examination. And 4362, employee anti-harassment. And then 2 additional statutory language alignment policies in Group 3, 2261, Title I services, and 5771, search and seizure. We also have included in the consent agenda policy 8800, religious activities and observances, policy 0171.3, clerk, policy 0100, definitions, policy 3440 and 4440, job-related expenses, policy 6424, procurement cards, and policy 5460, graduation requirements. Okay, if any board member wishes to have an item set aside for separate consideration, please indicate so at this time. Mrs. Voigt.
I would like to set aside for discussion policy 8800, religious activities and observances.
Okay.
And actually, just for the viewers, that are seeing that we're covering about 40 policies in this short period of time, I think it'd be worth talking about the changes, the revisions that were made in the 30 policies that, include the bulk of this system. So just for people to realize the change that has been made.
So we have 2 options on how we could go about that. The Teaching and Learning Committee and the Policy Committee have explanations for those policy changes that will come during the committee reports, or we could present those explanations during the consent discussion.
I think based on where they were discussed in committee, I'd like to bring them out, to bring them back in that context.
And the committee reports are okay with you?
Yeah, committee
Okay.
reports would be fine.
Okay.
And vote on them at that point.
Oh, that would be moving the policies out of the consent agenda.
Okay.
I would recommend if there's any concern about ability to vote on them in the consent agenda, we could provide those descriptions now if we have,
can do that.
when we get to the point of motion and discussion on the consent? Or we could discuss it now. I don't think it matters, right? I guess it would potentially, it sounds like it would change your request of which policies to leave in the consent agenda and which policies to pull out, or,
Well, I'd like to pull 88.
yeah, that one is separate.
Right.
Yeah,
And
Okay.
just, I think it's important to discuss the changes that were made in the 30 policies.
okay. Mr. Wad, would it be acceptable to you to provide that portion of your committee report
Sure.
now?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay,
Okay. So as was mentioned, there were 30 policies that were included in the consent agenda. They are there as a result of a federal court recently finding that guidance documents issued in 2021 from the Department of Education have no legal effect in several states, including Wisconsin. This was confirmed in a special update from Neola, which states that fact as well. As a result, we have 30 policies with inconsistent and irregular language defining protected classes and for which there is no statutory source. As a result, Board President Piasek asked me, as the Policy Committee Chair, Dr. Siebert, and District Legal Counsel to review the affected set of policies to ensure that, one, the language is the same across all School District of Waukesha policies. Two, that the language is consistent with that of the state of Wisconsin. Three, that the language is consistent with the intent of the SDW Board's Parental Rights and Transparency Resolution of 2023. Four, that the language has clear source documents for definitions. And five, that the language does not create requirements or definitions for which there are no regulatory sources. As a result, the Policy and Government Relations Committee unanimously approved changes to these 30 policies, and they included 18 policies which were adjusted to align with state statutory language pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 118.13, 10 policies which were adjusted to align with state statutory language pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 111.321, and 2 policies which were revised to change the word gender to sex for alignment with other policy revisions. And those, again, were broken out in the consent agenda, so you can see which of the policies align to which group.
thank you. Was that helpful? Mrs. Voigt?
Well, I think what's important is to realize what the new wording is, as these changes are made to be in compliance with 118.13 and 111.321. We're basically changing what fits in the category of being protected classes and, rewording, reshuffling a little bit. And I think that that's, significant to realize that that is a change in the way we are projecting our acceptance of, especially students that are in the protected class of being transgender, et cetera. In the first group, the new statement says that the board does not discriminate on the basis of sex, race, religion, national origin, ancestry, creed, pregnancy.
Mrs. Voigt, can I just interrupt you for a second? I'm feeling like this is a more lengthy discussion that kind of does not align to the intent of consent agenda, which might make more sense to actually revisit this in the policy committee.
Okay.
You're wanting to read the language changes in the policies?
It's important for people to realize the changes that are made because removing.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that when we put things in the consent agenda, they get there by way of our policy and procedure. So if we want to take the time to talk about what the changes are, I feel like we need to pull them out. Mr. Wad?
You're suggesting pulling them out of the consent agenda and moving them to the policy committee discussion? Okay. Thank you.
It's just not customary that we have this level of depth of discussion about what's in the consent agenda. I mean, I'll make the request to pull them out. I don't have a problem with that. I think if we're going to have this level of depth of discussion, I think we should put that where it belongs. Would that be okay? Okay. should we also review the graduation requirements, the justification for the graduation requirements policy? Otherwise, we'll cover that in the committee, you know, unless there's a question about whether or not we're going to vote on what we have. Okay. All right, so what I'm hearing is that the three groups of policies around statutory language changes are going to come back for further comment during, and action during the policy committee. So, Mr. Browski, that would be minus 30, and when you present the consent agenda. And Mrs. Koenig will hold the graduation requirements explanation till we get to teaching and learning, if that's okay. Okay.
So can I just clarification?
Yes.
So we're moving to three groups of policies, but nothing else.
And
And
8800.
okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Minus 31, yeah. Okay. Mr. Browski, would you present the consent agenda for approval, please?
For HR. Okay.
Yeah, you get the whole thing, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. So the Human Resource Compensation Committee met earlier this evening, as you all know. We have 2 resignations, 5 new or modified contracts for approval this evening. I move that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Wadd. Any comments? Other than the policies?
Right.
Okay. Mrs. Ettinger, would you take the roll call, please?
So would that be then approving the consent agenda as amended?
That would be approving the consent agenda as amended, correct? Yeah. Is that okay?
Yes,
Thank you.
that sounds good.
Mr. Wadd, was that your intent?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anthony Zenobia?
Aye.
Eric Brooks?
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski?
Aye.
Thomas Harland?
Aye.
Mark Borowski?
Aye.
Diane Voigt?
Aye.
Betty Koenig?
Aye.
David Wad?
Aye.
Kelly Piasek?
Aye, passes 9-0. All right, thank you for your patience with all of that. I know there was a lot in there. We will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Dr. Piasek. Very quickly for the board this evening, we're off to a fantastic start. We've just finished day 7 of the school year, and our entire staff is playing a huge role in ensuring that success, as certainly do our students and their families. And I just want to recognize all of our stakeholders for their contributions to the success of the start of this school year. And also, we heard earlier about our first community newsletter, which looked like this. This year, we're committed to doing 3 of those each year, as we talked about during F&F. And it does highlight a tremendous amount of SDW successes. I also want to just tell you how inspired we've been. In there, we talk about our senior passes that are available to senior citizens who are 62 years or older. And we've had between 30 or 40 people who have come in to pick up those passes to attend the vast array of athletic and fine arts events that our high schools are really proud to present. So I just want to encourage our community members to continue to do that. We are proud to pass out as many of those as we possibly can, invite as many people to see the success of our students and our staff. And I think it's game-changing when people get to see pieces like this or get into our schools or get into our events, because they see that kids are really amazing, teachers are really impressive, our administrative team is incredible, and anything we can do to highlight that success to our community, I think is well worthwhile, and we're proud to do. So with that being said, that concludes my report, Dr. Piasek.
All right, handing it back to Mr. Borowski. Anything additional for Human Resources and Compensation Committee?
No, that concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. All right, back again then to Policy and Government Relations. So, Mr. Wad, I think we'll bring those, that package back. Would you like to begin with your information item, and then we could take
Sure.
the actions? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so the Policy and Government Relations Committee met on Monday, September 9th. As discussed, the Policy and Government Relations Committee had 33 policy revisions, which were unanimously approved at the committee meeting, and the 2 that were included in the consent agenda as amended included Policy 0171.3 around clerk and 0100 definitions to add the definition of district clerk due to changes in Policy 0731 district clerk. And then during the government relations portion of, I guess I'll stop there and see if there are any questions on those policies? Okay. Then during the government relations portion of the meeting, Dr. Siebert reported that Senator Julian Bradley will be visiting the district tomorrow, Thursday, September 12th at 11 a.m. The visits have been an excellent opportunity for relationship building and to discuss how various legislative topics impact our district. Also, Dr. Siebert and Julie will be meeting with our Neola consultant later this month to review the Neola Wisconsin Local Policy Volume 33, Number 2 release. Any questions on either of those items? I would just add, I would encourage anyone who may be able to take the opportunity to come in and meet with Senator Bradley tomorrow. I've attended a couple of these, and I find them to be very beneficial, not just in being able to learn about what's going on in the legislature, but to help tell our story to him. And this is a district that he hasn't been representing in recent years, so good opportunity as board members to help him come up to speed with some of the things we have going on here.
If I may, Mr. Watt, there was
Yes, please.
there was a typo in your script. I apologize. He's coming tomorrow at noon, not 11
Oh, I
a.m.
thought- okay.
Yeah, yep.
I wondered about that, I should have asked.
No worries.
All right, so that's at 12 PM tomorrow.
12 p.m., yes.
All right.
That's not your fault. That was ours.
Thank you, Dr. Siebert. All right, with that, I guess we can move to the action items.
Yep, and your discretion, which one you would like to take first, 8800 or?
Why don't we take 8800 first? And then we can proceed to the group of 30. So 8800 is a policy around religious activities and observances. We first discussed this back in, I think, August of
23.
23. It was paired with patriotic activities in policy. We separated out the patriotic activities piece and created, was it a new policy that we created around that one, or?
Yeah, the patriotic observances became 8802, which was a new policy approved back in August of 23. And then we've been working for the better part of a year to find the sweet spot with 8800, which is a current policy, the one we're talking about here.
Yep. So, and this was largely driven by a Supreme Court decision called the Bremerton decision, which dealt with religious observations and activities and observances, and its appropriateness and legality in school settings. So, Dr. Siebert, I don't know if you'd like to provide any additional background on that for us?
No, I'd be welcome to do that, yes. So the major point that we've been struggling with is trying to figure out how do we address the role of coaches who oftentimes you've been to athletic events and maybe after a football game, for example, players from both teams meet at the 50-yard line and engage in some kind of a worship or prayer after a game. And so we worked with our legal counsel to add a sentence at the end of the third paragraph that we think the committee liked, and we hope the board does as well. And it says, "Nothing in this policy shall prohibit a coach from engaging in prayer or similar personal religious observances before or after athletic events while acting outside the scope of the coach's employment duties and provided such observances are not required or expected of students." And that's really the key, right? We don't want a situation where students feel compelled or forced to participate. However, if they're at their free will, they'd like to, they're welcome to. And outside of the employment duties, essentially the example we used is the coach is the coach. He's wearing his hat after the game. He's acting as an individual, and that's what the Kennedy versus Bremerton case outlines. He's taking that hat off. He's acting as an individual, and then he's putting that hat back on when he comes back to his team. So we think the policy committee had great discussion on it, and we think we got to a place where we have some clarity around what the expectations are. But I'd certainly welcome any of our other policy committee members to comment.
Mrs. Boyd.
This is one of the policies that I have lived with my entire life, as I shared with the committee. I was the senior board advisor, and we needed to decide how to handle baccalaureate back in the day. And now it's very clearly saying that the district will not conduct, direct, endorse, support, or sponsor, excuse me, or sanction a baccalaureate service as part of the graduation activities. And we used to have like people coming in and doing benedictions and blessings and things like that. And it's like, as the law was changing, it was always just like, am I going to get in trouble for saying a prayer at this baccalaureate type of ceremony, et cetera. So I appreciate that this policy now does clearly define what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And I also think it's really important to realize that this is a school district that was sued for how they interpreted the religious expectations happening. This coach wanted to say a prayer after the game. It was 3 different games back, I think it was 2015. And it took 7 years for this challenge of the First Amendment rights to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's, kind of a big deal to have that type of First Amendment situation, progress in that respect. As a retired business law teacher, I used to teach case law, and the idea of Supreme Court cases that really influence how we do business in the schools is a really important part of what I used to do, all the time. So I think that's why if you noted in the preparation for this, I suggested that we add actually the reference, because it was in our discussion, to the case law that is involved here, the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Kennedy versus Bremerton School District. And that's one of the references now, along with the statutes that are pertinent in that case.
Mr. Wadd?
Yeah, I guess I just want to push back on something I heard Mrs. Voigt. I am not aware of any lawsuit against the district based on religious observances.
I believe she was referring to, not to the school district of Waukesha.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you for clarifying.
But I heard it the same way, but I realize it's okay.
Okay.
It was just a misinterpretation.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments, or are there further discussion or modifications? Okay, Mr. Wadd?
Yeah, I would move to approve policy 8800, religious activities and observances as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Ms. Settinger, would you take the roll call, please?
Thomas Harland,
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. Okay, back to you, Mr. Wadd.
Okay. So you all have heard my description of the policy changes and the rationale behind them. I think I'd like to provide Dr. Siebert with an opportunity to provide any additional clarifying words he may have regarding these changes as well before we get into discussion.
And then I just want to make sure, because I did interrupt Mrs. Voigt when we were taking this on during the consent agenda, that we'll go to her first for comments once we open it back up. Thank you.
Sure. So we'll start with Group 1. Group 1 has 18 policies with the recommended language approved by the committee, and it's directly sourced from Wisconsin State Statute 118.13. And what it specifically says is it pulls right from the statute to say the characteristics of sex, race, religion, national origin, ancestry, creed, pregnancy, marital or parental status, sexual orientation, or physical, mental, emotional, or learning disability. So Mr. Wadd had previously reviewed how we worked through that with legal counsel. Our legal counsel reviewed and recommended that common language sourced in state statute for the committee's consideration, which they approved, and then that comes forward to the board for your considered approval.
Thank you. Mrs. Voigt, did you want to continue with your comments?
Yes. I just saw in today's Freeman, along with the beautiful article introducing our new board member, an article, though, at the Kettle Moraine federal complaint that's accusing them of failing to implement the new Title IX rules. And they're saying that their complaint alleges that the district is fostering a hostile environment. And I just would, hate to have us fit in the category of creating a hostile environment by removing some of the language in this subsection that we have had up to this point, where we were identifying, the sex is being components of, gender and gender status, change of sex, or gender identity as part of a protected class. So we're basically removing two categories, or a couple categories from a protected class that could be perceived to be a hostile kind of change that we're making to our policy.
Mr. Borowski? Oh, geez.
Yes, I appreciate your point, Mrs. Voigt. I don't know if there were specific, I know this language applies to all the policies in that group 10. One thing I did want to point out, at least in two of the policies, 5517 and 551701, despite the change in language, there is a statement of, let me just try to find it in one of them here. Basically, that it's not limited to those protected classes, like bullying still, well, let me just find it. Just give me a minute here, I had it here. So in 5517, which would be the third paragraph where the changes were made, after the changes, the last sentence, it does say, additionally, the board prohibits harassing behavior directed at students for any reason, even if not based on one of the protected classes through its policies on bullying. So I thought that was an important statement there. And then 551701 says something similar. Yeah, so right after the highlighted changes under bullying, it does say, however, this type of prohibited bullying behavior need not be based on any of those particular or other particular characteristics. So I think it's, I guess in essence, I would think it would, well, it's basically saying it's not limited to those protected classes, that we just don't tolerate bullying and student harassment. So I just wanted to point that out.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
I guess the way that I'm looking at this is when these changes were initially done, they were made without any application to our current state statutes. The guidance of our policies is that we are aligned with our state statutes and the local laws that govern local governing of our school district. So this is, I think, the right move for us to be doing. I think it gets us aligned correctly with our state statutes. And quite honestly, I think it's just that simple. I think it's what needs to be done in making sure like all of our policies are linked directly to listed state statutes.
Mr. Watt?
Yeah, I think the other thing that's important to point out here is if anyone took the opportunity to go back and look at the previous language, it was completely inconsistent. There are definitions that are completely missing for many of those terms that were included, with absolutely no statutory language anywhere to help us understand what those terms meant, which frankly I think is more of a potential issue for the district than ensuring that our language is tied directly to state statutory language. Now, I am aware of the complaint that's been filed in Kettle Moraine, but I would point out two things. We don't govern based upon what happens in Kettle Moraine or any other district. We govern based upon Waukesha and the Waukesha School District and what we believe is best for the district. And number two, while there was a mention of this somehow tying to Title IX rule changes that have been proposed by the federal government, Department of Education, we know that currently 26 states are enjoined from implementing them. And furthermore, due to a case in Kansas that extended protection to students of a variety of different groups that had sued to prevent the implementation of Title IX, including Moms for Liberty and Young Americans for Freedom. I believe there's at least one other group. All of our high schools, all of our middle schools, and several of our elementary schools all have students that are enjoined from being able to, or I should say the federal government, at the very least, is enjoined from enforcing them there. And I interpret that ruling to say we are enjoined from implementing them. I don't know why we would implement policies that continue to be tied up in a number of court cases nationwide. So to bring it back to what we're trying to do here, with the Title IX changes being the only thing I'm aware of that discusses this from a federal law perspective, and absolutely no definitions in state law beyond what we are implementing in terms of definitions of protected classes. I don't see any reason to keep the language we previously had, and I think it's actually in our interest as a district to make these changes and make them soon, because the language we have now is really kind of a mess across all of those policies if you go and look.
I'm actually, did you have something?
Is there someone else?
Yeah, I was going to actually give some context. Okay, just a little bit of context about why I asked also Mr. Watt and Dr. Siebert to work with district legal counsel on this. So Neola further confirmed what I think we had already known, but there were two instances over the course of the summer where the original Title IX guidance documents and some related documents and letters that came from the Department of Education were actually adopted into policies by numerous districts across the state of Wisconsin in 2021 at Neola's recommendation. What that did is it targeted a number of policies, but not all of the policies. And it created parenthetical language around the definition of sex that created significant inconsistency throughout our policies. And then there was language that had like half of a word crossed out. So where it would say, at one point, potentially in like 2017, it said transgender status, and then in 2018, it was crossed off and it became gender status. And so when we started to look at all that, based on this new decision that came this year, was actually interesting timing, right? Because the decision that the federal court announced was after the Title IX final rule was actually released, but that decision invalidated the guidance documents on which our policy language had actually been referenced. And so we find ourselves kind of in this space where there's no formal policy language that we can actually point to, or I'm sorry, regulatory or statutory language that we could point to explain why those words were there. And when you start to look across our employment policies, our student-related policies, the things that were inside and outside the parentheses were inconsistent. The way that the words were actually captured inside and outside the parentheses were inconsistent. And the other thing that's worth noting, although I don't believe that we're at a point where, because of what Mr. Wad mentioned, that we can fully adopt what was issued through the final rule from the Department of Education, is that there is not a requirement in that implementation to further define sex. There is a requirement, if and when that is enforceable, that the definition of sex set by the federal government is embraced, right? But I think that is still left for discussion. I do think that where we're at right now with this language that references the state statute is that it gives us a much greater degree of flexibility to respond to federal and state law as that changes, versus one of the 5 points I asked them to consider was not inventing requirements that we don't have statutory reference for. So that was one of the reasons I was trying to see if they could recommend language and working with legal that would be more consistent with that. And so Neola further confirmed that those documents weren't a valid source document for us anymore, and therefore we're kind of stuck without a source document other than to look back at state statute. And so that was, I greatly appreciate what they came back with, because I think there's consistency and there's formality to that. That, like I said, in some cases, it would say sex and then parentheses, including sexual orientation. Well, now we say sex, sexual orientation. So that language has been aligned to state statute. So that was the reason why I asked for that to be reviewed, and that's why I really appreciate what they came back with. Mr. Wad?
Yeah, I'm not sure how we want to do this, but I think what I'm going to do is move to approve the 18 policies in Group 1 as presented.
Okay. Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Any further discussion? Mrs. Ettinger, would you take the roll call, please?
David Wad.
Aye.
Thomas Harland.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. Mr. Wad, did you want to?
Yeah,
Go again.
I would just actually ask Dr. Siebert to now provide us, because there is different statutes involved here, to provide some more information on Group 2.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Wad. So in Group 2, as outlined in the consent agenda, there are 10 policies. These are more employee-related policies with recommended language updates sourced from Wisconsin State Statute 111.321. And specifically, the language in that statute reads, age, race, creed, color, disability, marital status, sex, national origin, ancestry, arrest record, conviction record, military service, use or non-use of lawful products off the employer's premises during non-working hours, or declining to attend a meeting or to participate in any communication about religious matters or political matters. So that, again, was reviewed by our legal counsel, recommended by our legal counsel as common language sourced in the statute that the committee approved. And then I also mentioned at the committee meeting that it's also common language from the Wisconsin Fair Employment Act. And so with each of the policies in Group 2, we added the reference to 111.321 at the end for that direct linkage to the statutory sourcing.
Thank you. Mrs. Voigt.
I appreciate the explanation to be a part of the public record. You know, just in case somebody would question why we're doing what we're doing, it's based on the law that exists. And I think that that's an important factor.
Thank you. Mr. Wad.
Yes, I would move adoption of the 10 policies associated with Group 2 as presented to the board.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Okay, Mrs. Ettinger, would you take the roll call, please?
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Thomas Harland.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. And I think we have 2 left. Okay.
Yes, so Dr. Siebert, if you could just fill us in on those?
Yeah, my pleasure, Mr. Wad. So in Group 3, we do have 2 policies, 2261 Title I Services and 5771 Search and Seizure. Based on the changes made to legally source the policies in Groups 1 and 2 that have been approved at the committee and now at the board level, the recommended language change in these 2 policies is to remove the word gender and replace it with the word sex for consistency and alignment with our other policies that are statutorily sourced. And so this recommended change was also reviewed and supported by our legal counsel. Committee approved it, and it's now up for your considered approval.
Mr. Wad.
Yes, I would move for approval of the 2 policies in Group 3 as presented.
Second.
I heard Mrs. Koenig first, seconded by Mrs. Koenig. All right. Mrs. Ettinger, would you take the roll call, please?
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Thomas Harland.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. Okay, thank you, everybody. Mr. Wad.
Yep, and so just to finish up, our next Policy and Government Relations Committee will be held on Monday, October 7th, and this concludes my report.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right, our next committee report is Finance and Facilities by Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. The Finance and Facilities Committee met on Monday, September 9th. There was one action item. The committee approved the revisions to policies 3440, 4440, and 6424, which were approved on the consent agenda this evening. Moving into the discussion items, the first discussion items is district and e-Achieve marketing. Mary Jo King and Principal Jason Smith were in attendance to go through the district's current marketing and advertising plan and outline some new ideas that are being considered.
Mrs. Koenig.
I just want to say it was fantastic. I was so excited to see the different strategies and things that they're implementing, including the flyer and all the other things that eAchieve is doing. So it was exciting to see. I'm really excited.
That was very good, yeah. Okay.
The next discussion item was the budget development. The committee reviewed the 2024-2025 preliminary budget and budget development calendar, which also included the important dates leading up to the approval of the final budget and tax levy in late October. The third discussion item was the district long-term debt report. The committee reviewed two Fund 39 cash flow projections. The difference between the two scenarios is the projected percent increase in equalization aid for fiscal year 2024-2025, 4%, which is included in the preliminary budget, and 8%. Both scenarios factor in the following: interest revenue for the remaining payback period at 4.85%, prepayment of all 2027 to 2029 debt maturities on their call date of April 1st, 2026. Prepayment on the call date under each scenario will save taxpayers $505,650 in interest expense. Under both scenarios, the district's tax levy for Fund 39 referendum approved long-term debt could happen as soon as the fall of 2025. A list of outstanding long-term debt balances, principal only, for the 10 largest school districts in the state and our Waukesha County neighbors was also presented to the committee.
Mr. Bott.
Yes. So, Mr. Clark, I'm going to give you an opportunity to help me out here. So, I had someone ask me when we were discussing our current debt position, why we wouldn't just go ahead and pay off as much of the debt as we can with funds that we're instead defeasing. And the reason is, and I would like you to confirm this, we're getting a better interest rate in savings than the interest rate we're paying, which means it's actually a net win for us to save it instead of pay it at this particular time. Is that correct?
I believe the bond issuances have several different interest rates, so I'm not going to say universally, but overall, on average, that would be true. But really, the other answer to that question would be, we've been using the defeasance in the Fund 39 levy to manage our overall tax levy and provide stability. So some years in the way we do it, maybe we're losing a little interest, but I think that stability is what people are after. And I think for most of the bond issues out there, that the interest rate is favorable right now.
Thank you.
The last discussion item was the monthly budget report. Year-to-date revenue and expenditures are within the normal range for the phase of the school year. In August, we received the final tax payment for the 2023-2024 school year. The next Finance and Facilities meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 7th at 5:30 PM in the boardroom. And Dr. Piasek, this concludes my report.
Thank you. All right, the next committee report is a Teaching and Learning Committee given by Mrs. Koenig.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. The Teaching and Learning Committee met last week, Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. We had two discussion or informational items to appear on tonight's agenda, but one we're going to be revisiting, correct? The policy for, did we end up putting?
We already approved it, but I think we can just share the
Okay, great,
explanation
great. I
for
just want to make
what's
sure that
in
we're
there,
good
yeah.
to just share. Okay. So the first we have is an assessment update. The School District of Waukesha will continue with the balanced assessment system, which includes common formative and summative assessments, district assessments, and required state assessments. There were 3 assessment changes discussed. The first change is related to Act 20 early literacy requirements. The state of Wisconsin has selected Ames Web as the early literacy screener. The district had selected FastBridge in 2023 as its screener, believing that it was the most comprehensive resource, but will now be required to transition to Ames Web by January of 2025. In an effort to provide the most seamless information to educators and families, the district will move quickly to adopt the Ames Web platform this fall. The second change is at the high school level. Students will participate in the pre-ACT assessment rather than the MAP assessment as in years past. The third change impacts the Wisconsin Forward exam. The committee discussed DPI's announcement of a new proficiency language descriptors and changes to the performance thresholds that assign students to new proficiency levels. Unfortunately, at this time, the district and the committee are unaware of any guidance provided by the DPI to compare prior year test results to those results anticipated to be released next month. Regardless of these three changes, the school district of Waukesha has created a revised and improved assessment page linked from the district's website. That page was shared and included multiple resources for staff and families to aid in understanding the various assessments used, how to interpret them, and how to find resources to answer questions.
Mr. Brooks has a comment or question.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank our leadership team for their work on this. I know it was alluded to in public comment about the kind of evolving standards that are being handed down from DPI, and it makes it difficult for districts like ours and other districts across the state to compare student achievement now versus student achievement under the previous standards and metrics. But I really appreciate the work that our leadership team is doing to try to work through that. Also want to shout out the website that was put together it's a really, really easy way for families and for students and teachers to know which exams are going on when and when they need to be preparing for them. I think it's a really useful tool for our families here.
Thank you.
Okay, and second, earlier this evening, as part of the consent agenda, the board approved changes to policy 5460, graduation requirements. The committee has been working with the administrative team since May to incorporate the requirements for personal financial planning that will become a prerequisite for graduation, starting with the class of 2028. This is the result of the Wisconsin Act 60 signed into law earlier this year. While approximately 30% of STW high school students already took personal finance planning as an elective in prior years, this will now be a requirement, starting with the incoming freshman class. In working through the graduation requirements policy update, we determined that several years of updates had resulted in a policy that was too difficult to follow. Therefore, the teaching and learning team made formatting improvements that would help students and administrators better understand and comply with graduation requirements. Another improvement made was that the district has established a PE exemption procedure that aligns the process and the criteria for receiving physical education waivers for qualifying sports and activities across all three traditional high schools. And just as a note, our key performance indicators for the teaching and learning department were approved at our committee meeting last week. Earlier this evening, all the department KPIs were presented together under general business. Madam President, that includes the Teaching and Learning Committee report. Our next meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 1st, 2024 at 7 p.m. In the boardroom here at the Blair Administration Building.
Thank you. Were there any additional comments on the teaching and learning? Okay, we'll move next to the Student Services Committee. Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you, Dr. Piasek. So the Student Services Committee met on September 3rd. We had 3 action items and 1 discussion information item on the agenda. The first action item was policy 5350, student suicide. The policy is a full replacement of the existing policy to account for significant revisions. The new policy includes general prevention provisions, including instructional elements, and also provides more procedures pertinent to specific student situations involving student intervention. The policy was developed with the assistance of suicide prevention experts. And on a vote of 4-0, the Student Service Committee approved the full replacement of policy 5350 as presented. The committee requests board approval, and I so move.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Okay. Okay, any discussion or questions about that? Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Ettinger, would you take the roll call, please?
Betty Koenig?
Aye.
Mark Borowski?
Aye.
Eric Brooks?
Aye.
David Wad?
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia?
Aye.
Thomas Harlan?
Aye.
Harry Kozlowski?
Aye.
Diane Voigt?
Aye.
Kelly Piasek?
Aye, passes 9-0.
Our second action item was the approval of the 24-25 students at risk of not graduating from high school identification plan. Mark Leonard presented this information about the identification, intervention, and annual reevaluation processes. According to state statute 118.153, the plan must be reviewed annually by the Board of Education. The plan identified our processes and procedures in alignment with the state statutes and provide clear guidance and support to all school teams using the process. The only changes to the plan for 24-25 are the updated assessments used to monitor the academic and skill progress of our students. On a vote of 4-0, the Student Services Committee approved the School District of Waukesha Student at Risk Plan as presented, and I so move.
Mrs. Voigt?
A second.
Seconded by Mrs. Voigt. Any questions, comments? Okay, Mrs. Ettinger.
Carrie Kozlowski?
Aye.
David Wad?
Aye.
Betty Koenig?
Aye.
Eric Brooks?
Aye.
Diane Voigt?
Aye.
Mark Borowski?
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia?
Aye.
Thomas Harlan?
Aye.
Kelly Piasek?
Aye, passes 9-0.
Our third action item was discussed, was on our key performance indicators, which were approved by our committee, and also this evening were also approved and presented under general business. Moving on to our last item was our discussion and information item was a transportation update. Mr. Pat had presented information from first student about driver staffing and hiring. On the first day of school, all routes were covered by a driver, and first student has 9 additional drivers in training at this time. Parents are invited to visit the transportation page of our website for first student contact information, community busing details, busing safety information, and multiple other frequently asked questions.
Mr. Wad?
Yeah. I just want to congratulate the people within the administration, first student, all the people who put the hard work in to make sure that all those routes were covered on day one. I think just knowing what we have learned about the difficulties in this industry, getting drivers, not just in our district, but across really the United States, I think there was some concern whether we would ever have all routes covered on day one, and for us to have accomplished that, I think all those people that were involved in making that happen deserve a lot of thanks and gratitude for the efforts they put in to make sure that happened.
Mrs. Voigt?
I agree. It's truly a celebration to be at the place we are now compared to where we were all last year.
I would just add that I happened to be here on one of the nights that Mrs. Thede and team were hosting a job fair, and included the busing company and the food service, and just the way it was done, it was very well attended. There were numerous staff and administrators in the room, but also just watching the cooperation and the movement of potential applicants between the different organizations. I think just the work that was done, understanding some of the limitations to certain positions and the flexibility or the part-time capacity of different positions, just that collaboration among organizations was just incredibly impressive. So thank you for all of that, and it was really great to see how proactive everybody was.
That would complete the committee report for student services. We'll be back here on Tuesday, October 1st at 6 p.m. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zenobia. All right, that concludes our committee reports for tonight. Next, are there any recommendations for future board or committee action or discussion items? All right, we do have a need for closed session tonight, and so I would be looking for someone to motion for executive session. Mr. Borowski.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent E, for the deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. And this refers to the North High School drainage project.
Second.
Thank you. All right, Mrs. Ettinger.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Thomas Harlan.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Betty Koenig.
Aye.
David Wad.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 9-0. So we will adjourn to executive session. We will likely be returning. Before I forget, our next meeting is Wednesday, October 9th at 6:30 PM here in the boardroom. So we are currently adjourned to executive session. Thank you.
Are we ready?
Yep.
Okay, we are back in session from executive session, and I think we are going to take roll call. Mr. Wad.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Here.
David Wad here. Betty Koenig.
Here.
Eric Brooks.
Here.
Diane Voigt.
Here.
Mark Borowski.
Here.
Anthony Zenobia.
Here.
Thomas Harland.
Here.
Kelly Piasek.
Here. And I believe we're prepared to make a motion. Mrs. Kozlowski.
I motion to approve the letter of intent with the City of Waukesha as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
I saw Mrs. Voigt first, so seconded by Mrs. Voigt. All right, Mr. Wad, would you please take the roll call?
Yes. Betty Koenig.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Eric Brooks.
Aye.
David Wad. Aye. Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Thomas Harland.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Diane Voigt.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye. Passes 9-0. All right, thank you, everyone. That concludes our meeting for tonight. Have a good night.